You wake up, but nothing wakes with you. The room is still. Your back isn't sore, your head isn't heavy, your sleep wasn't restless. There was no bad dream, no pain in the night, no reason to feel like something's missing. But there's a slowness in the way you move your legs out from under the blanket. A pause before standing. The kind that says, not yet. There are mornings now when getting dressed feels like something you need to plan for. Not because it's difficult, but because it feels distant, as if the day is already asking more than you have. Fatigue in older age doesn't always arrive in loud ways. It doesn't come with fever or sharp aches or urgent symptoms. It settles in quieter places, in the length of time it takes to start the day, in the way chairs hold you a little longer than they used to, in the fact that you sit before doing things you never sat for before. And when this happens often enough, it starts to feel like part of the day. Not something to fix, just something to carry. But tiredness has its reasons. The kind that don't always show up on a chart. The kind that build up slowly and live in the background of your routines. You may not be sleeping worse, but rest doesn't refresh you the way it once did. You may not feel sick, but small tasks seem to use more of you than they should. The days aren't full, but they leave you empty. And you start to wonder what part of this is just age and what part isn't. The trouble is, no one tells you what to expect. Not in real detail. They say to stay active, to eat well, to get sleep. But what happens when you've done all of that and still feel like the day pulls at you harder than it used to? In this video, we're going to talk about that feeling, not in generalities, but in 5 clear, connected reasons that explain why older adults often feel more tired now, even when nothing seems wrong. Not all of them apply to everyone, but they're all real. And understanding them doesn't just help you name what's happening. It helps you move through it, with less doubt, with more clarity, with a little less of that quiet weight that waits for you every morning. So if you've been wondering why your energy has changed, not in dramatic ways, but in quiet ones, this conversation is for you. And if you've ever started your day already tired, even when nothing felt wrong, stay with me. We're going to take a close, honest look at where that tiredness might be coming from and how to meet it with something better than frustration. You went to bed on time. The lights were off. The room was quiet. The routine unchanged. And when you woke, the clock said you'd slept a full night. But something in your body disagrees. You don't feel unrest. You don't feel sick. You just don't feel restored. It's as if sleep came, but didn't stay. Or maybe it stayed, but never reached where it needed to go. This kind of tiredness confuses people, because it doesn't match what we were taught about sleep. You're told to get 7 or 8 hours. You do. And yet the day begins with a weight that sleep was supposed to lift. In older age, sleep changes in ways that don't always feel obvious. You may fall asleep easily. You may not even remember waking. But the body keeps score differently. You may shift more at night. The sleep cycles, once deep and long, now fragment. The parts of sleep that heal, that regenerate, that refill energy, they begin to shorten. Not disappear. Just thin out. Some nights, the bladder calls before the mind is ready to move. Other nights, dreams stir too vividly and leave something unsettled. And some nights, though quiet, pass like water through cloth. You lie still, but rest does not arrive the way it used to. There are also the small awakenings that you no longer remember. A shifting joint, a dry mouth, a brief moment of alertness that fades before thought returns. Individually, they mean little. Together, they scatter the night into fragments too small to restore anything fully. And so the morning brings with it a confusion. Not exhaustion, but not readiness either. You sit at breakfast, and the chair holds you longer than it used to. The newspaper stays folded. The toast cools untouched. You're not sleepy, but you're not in motion either. The engine is on, but the gears hesitate. This isn't about failing to sleep. It's about not reaching the kind of sleep that builds energy back. Not because you did something wrong, but because the body, over time, changes how it resets itself. And once this becomes common, it begins to influence everything else. Mood, memory, appetite, even balance. The body that hasn't truly rested doesn't speak clearly. It moves slower, reacts softer, lets things pass that once would have stirred it to life. You don't need more sleep. You need better sleep. But that's not something you find in a single fix. It comes from noticing what steals depth from your nights and learning to take some of that depth back. Sometimes it's about light, or noise, or temperature. Sometimes it's about patterns in the day that carry into the night, naps too late, meals too small, thoughts left unresolved. But more than anything, it's about knowing that tiredness in the morning isn't laziness. It's a message. Not always loud, but honest. Let me ask you this. When did you first notice that a full night's sleep no longer means a full tank of energy? The day hasn't been long, but already your legs feel like they've done more than they have. You haven't walked far. You haven't lifted anything heavy. And yet, when you stand, the movement asks for more strength than expected. This isn't weakness in the way we once understood it, the kind that signals illness or injury. It's something quieter, a slow reduction in power, a delay between decision and action. The moment when you know you want to rise and feel your body hesitate before it agrees. You start planning for things that used to happen on instinct. Which chair is lower? Which path has fewer steps? Where you might pause halfway through the grocery store. None of this feels like giving up, but it doesn't feel like strength either. And underneath it all, there's that tiredness again, not from effort, but from the feeling that effort is always required now, even for the smallest things. As we age, muscle doesn't simply vanish. It recedes, not from disuse alone, but from the body's natural shift in priorities. Energy is used differently. Protein is processed more slowly. And repair, which once happened quietly overnight, now needs more time and more help. The medical term is sarcopenia, but you don't need the word to know the feeling. You sense it in your legs after a few minutes standing, in your arms when holding a pot a little too long, in the stairs that didn't used to feel like work. And when the muscles grow thinner, the effort spreads. Joints carry more weight. Balance becomes harder to trust. The body conserves energy by doing less, and the less it does, the more tired it feels doing anything at all. It's a slow cycle. Easy to miss, even easier to adapt to. You sit a little longer. You cancel the walk if the weather turns. You decide the thing you meant to do can wait until tomorrow. Not because you're avoiding it, but because something inside you says, not today. The problem is not rest. It's the quiet shrinking of movement until rest becomes the default. And when the body forgets how it used to move, tiredness isn't just common, it becomes expected. But here's the strange thing. The muscles still remember. Even now. Even at 75, or 82, or 90. They still respond to small use. To simple requests. Not to exhaust them, just to remind them. Lifting a light object a few more times. Pushing up from a chair instead of pulling on an armrest. Standing for a moment longer than feels necessary. These don't rebuild youth. But they bring the body back into participation, into the rhythm of effort and reward. And in that rhythm, fatigue softens. Because sometimes what we call tiredness is not depletion, it's disuse. So let me ask you, is there a kind of tiredness in your day that feels more like slowness than exhaustion? And do you notice where in your body it begins? There's a kind of discomfort that doesn't ask for medicine. It doesn't stop you from doing what you need to do. But it's there, in the knees when standing, in the fingers when writing, in the back that takes a little longer to straighten. You move through it, but it takes something from you. One woman described it as feeling like my whole body is running at a low hum. Not pain, not illness, just a sense that everything is slightly harder than it should be. That feeling has a name, or at least a cause. Low-grade inflammation. It isn't the sharp heat of infection. It's not the redness around a wound or the swelling after a sprain. It's the quiet, internal state where the immune system stays slightly active all the time, even when there's nothing to fight. And the older the body, the more likely it is to settle into that pattern. This kind of chronic low-grade inflammation is one of the most studied aspects of aging in recent years. It's been linked to fatigue, memory issues, slow healing, poor sleep, and even changes in mood. Doctors sometimes call it inflammaging not as a diagnosis, but as a description of how the immune system behaves over time. Instead of turning off after a threat, it stays on, not loudly, but constantly. And that small, ongoing activity draws energy away from other systems. You may not notice it day to day, but over time, it shows up in the body's reluctance to recover fully, in the way you feel slower even without doing more. It's part of why you might feel worn out after errands that used to energize you, or why your legs feel fine during a walk, but heavy in the evening. It's not a single event. It's a shift in the baseline, and it often goes unnoticed until you're already adjusting your days to fit it. There's no specific test to confirm this feeling, but it's real, and it's made worse by stillness, poor sleep, high blood sugar, or meals that lack color and variety. One recent study found that older adults with higher levels of systemic inflammation had more trouble maintaining regular activity, even when their muscles and joints were otherwise healthy. It's not just wear and tear. It's the immune system staying busy when it should be resting. But like everything else in the body, it listens. To food, to movement, to rest, to small choices repeated daily. And the difference between, "I'm tired because I've done too much," and "I'm tired because I always feel like this," often comes down to whether that internal inflammation has found a place to settle. So here's something to think about. Have you ever felt like your body was dragging, not because of anything you did, but because it just started the day already behind? You might eat well. Your fridge isn't empty. There's soup in the freezer, bread on the shelf, maybe eggs or cheese waiting for breakfast. You're not starving, but still, you're tired. Not sharply, not suddenly, just often, just persistently. And maybe your doctor hasn't mentioned anything. Your checkups are fine. Your blood pressure is stable. But something doesn't feel finished, like your body is running on half its usual fuel without setting off any alarms. It's in this space that nutrient deficiencies often settle. Not enough to cause a crisis, just enough to make everything a little harder than it should be. And because they're invisible at first, they often go unrecognized for years. Iron, B12, vitamin D, 3 of the most common gaps in older adults, and 3 of the least obvious. You don't need to be anemic to be low on iron. You don't need nerve pain to be missing B12. You don't need broken bones to be short on vitamin D. Before any of those things happen, your body just starts feeling slower. Vitamin B12 is absorbed differently after 60. Your stomach makes less acid. The proteins that carry B12 from food to blood don't work as efficiently. So even if you eat meat or dairy, the vitamin may not reach your bloodstream in usable form. And when B12 drops too low, the brain starts to lag. You forget where the sentence was going. You lose focus midway through a simple task. Your limbs feel a little less coordinated. It doesn't always feel like memory loss. More like your thoughts are moving through syrup. Iron is similar. Even with no bleeding, even with a normal diet, some people simply absorb less. And that slight drop, over months, means the blood carries less oxygen than it used to, which means the muscles tire faster, the lungs feel tight more quickly, and climbing stairs becomes something you think twice about. And then there's vitamin D, not just about bones. It modulates the immune system. It affects mood, muscle strength, and inflammation. It's made in the skin with sunlight, but as skin thins with age, it becomes less efficient at producing what the body needs. Even people who sit by sunny windows can be low, because it's not about warmth. It's about the UVB that filters through, or doesn't. Most people with low D don't feel sick. They just feel flat, and they don't know why. You might still have an appetite, but not the variety you used to. You may no longer cook full meals, or feel like shopping as often. You go for what's easy, predictable. Toast, cereal, tea, something soft. But tiredness doesn't care whether you eat often. It cares whether you eat well enough to replenish what's missing. That's why blood work, even once a year, can reveal more than symptoms can. Not for everything, but for the quiet deficits that don't speak until they've made their home in your energy levels. It's not a matter of adding pills. It's a matter of asking, what might be quietly missing from my plate, or from my body, that I haven't yet noticed? Have you ever had a test come back low, and only then realized how long your body had been trying to tell you something? You get through the day without anything difficult happening, and still, by evening, there's a tiredness that feels harder to name. It doesn't come from physical effort. You may not have left the house. You may have taken it easy, paced yourself, done only the essentials. And yet, something feels drained by the time the day begins to close. It often builds up when there's no one else around to share the thinking. Simple things, remembering to refill prescriptions, checking which appointment is coming up next week, planning what needs to be picked up when you go out. None of it feels like work on its own, but the accumulation can leave the mind tense and slightly overloaded. There's no moment of stress, no spike of emotion. Just a long, steady current of attention that doesn't turn off. Even when you're sitting still, Your thoughts continue sorting, reminding, calculating. Not because something is wrong, but because that's how the day has trained you to function. And this mental activity, quiet, persistent, wears on the body in a way that's easy to ignore until it settles in as fatigue. When the evening light softens and the last task is behind you, there's often a subtle shift, not just physical slowing, but the sense that your mind can finally exhale. It doesn't always feel like relief. Sometimes it just feels quiet. And in that quiet, you realize how much of the day you've spent carrying. You weren't rushing, and nothing was urgent, but the responsibility of remembering, managing, and tracking still required energy. You may notice that you haven't spoken out loud in a while, or that you've been putting off a call, not because it's difficult, but because your energy to connect feels thinner than usual. This isn't a crisis. It's part of living with more years behind you and often fewer voices around you. The days are quieter, but your attention still works as hard as it ever did. And that work, even when invisible, draws on your reserves. What helps isn't stimulation. It's space, the kind that doesn't ask you to hold anything in mind, doesn't expect you to plan, doesn't require a response. Reading something without needing to remember it. Watching the street from a window, just to see it change. Having a thought that doesn't have to lead anywhere. The body rests more deeply when the mind feels no pressure to stay alert. That kind of rest doesn't come often. But when it does, even for a few minutes, you can feel the difference, not just in mood, but in how ready you are for the next small thing. If today's video gave you language for something you felt but rarely described, I hope you'll consider subscribing. These conversations matter because they're about real life, not performance. Thank you for spending this time here. It means more than you know.